the Old Testament lesson from 2 Kings, chapter 2, beginning at verse 9. When they had crossed over, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I may do for you before I am taken from you." And Elisha said, "Please, let me inherit a double share of your spirit." Elijah responded, "You've asked a hard thing. Yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted to you. If not, it will not. It will be granted to you." As they continued walking and talking, a chariot of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended in a whirlwind into heaven. Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and their horsemen." But when he could see no longer, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in two pieces. Turning to the New Testament, we read this day, continuing in the Gospel of Mark, there in the 9th chapter, beginning at the 2nd verse. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain, apart, by themselves. And Jesus was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, such as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, who were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, for they were terrified. Then a cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud there came a voice, "This is my Son, the beloved. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked around, they saw no one with them anymore, only Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So end our lessons for this day. What do we do with transfiguration? How many times have you seen glory? According to Raiders of the Lost Ark, according to the Old Testament, if you witness the glory of God, you die. So how often have you seen glory? This is a strange set of passages. We know what to do with Christmas. We know what to do with Lent. We know what to do with communion and baptism and Easter morning and Pentecost. Those are celebrations of the church. But having been to the top of Mount Tabor, where this was supposed to happen, they have gone ahead and built tabernacles into a church. And there on the top of the mountain, there is a big sheet of glass on top of the rock. So you can see where it happened. And what are we supposed to do with it? There are times in our life that are holy faith experiences. The giving birth to a child, the celebration of a marriage, the passing of a loved one, overcoming a cancer, facing a great contest and winning. These are experiences in the moment in which we realize the glory that's there, the hope and celebration. There are also spiritual journeys in which we decide to go to Tanzania as a missionary. We sing in the choir. We are elected to serve as elders and deacons or Sunday school teachers. And through these experiences, our lives are changed. But the transfiguration, that's something more. More than our normal routine, more than an experience of faith or a journey of the Spirit. It's a once-in-a-lifetime, once-in-the-world event that changes all time and space. Speaking with colleagues about what are we going to do with this, one described that, so instead of glory, insert the word light, because in the beginning, God created the light and separated it from the darkness, and Jesus is the light of the world, so anytime it says glory, simply insert light. The difficulty is we're children of the Enlightenment. We like to know. We like to grasp and hold on to and be able to replicate experiences as all of us experienced this last summer when the eclipse happened. You can't look at the light. It's too brilliant. You can't hold on to it. You can't stare at it. You can only experience it in the moment and then try to describe it to others. Transfiguration is about something more. Earlier in the Gospel of Mark, right before this passage, Jesus had been walking with the disciples, those who had left their families and their careers and their friends and their community, left everything they knew to go on this spiritual journey with this rabbi. And they had seen him do miracles. They had seen him heal lepers, restore sight to the blind, the ability to walk to those who were lame, those who were mute, the ability to talk plainly, and those with mental illness to be calmed and rational. They had lived with him as a man and walked with him these last several months. And Jesus turned to them and said, "So, who do you think that I am? Who do people say that I am?" And they had all kinds of different answers. A few weeks ago in the coffee hour, two people approached me and said, "So we've been having an argument. Are you and Mario our friends, or are you our pastors?" The two overlap, but there's a nuance of difference. If we are your friends, there are times we can't serve as your pastor. There are times that hard words have to be said, and we have to listen for condemnation in order to get to forgiveness and redemption. But years ago, in my first year in ministry, I got a phone call from a dear friend. And Maynard said, "My wife just collapsed in the backyard. I've called the EMTs, but I don't know what to do." And I rushed out of the church to his side and sat with his wife. She died. And when the EMTs came and pronounced her as passed, they asked, "And who are you?" And Maynard said, "He's my friend." I can't think of a greater honor. That's being the community of faith. It's not about titles. It's not about reverend or doctor or elder or deacon, but to be there for each other in the midst of life and death. Simon Peter makes this huge jump of faith that no one had ever made before. When Jesus asked, "Who do you think that I am?" he stood up and said, "You are the Messiah, the anointed one from God." And Jesus said, "Yes, and that means that I'm going to suffer and I'm going to die." 6 days later, they were still on the road, and three of them, Peter, James, and John, went up the mountain with Jesus, and there they saw this transfiguration. It's sort of like a dream sequence in a book or movie. It's something out of time and out of place that doesn't seem to make sense to us. How could Moses and Elijah be there with, how could Jesus glow whiter than any light we'd ever seen? How could we hear the voice of God? I think there are times in life in which we go from being a trusted person to one another to being more than that. For the disciples, the witnesses that day, Jesus went from being their rabbi, their friend whom they had eaten with and slept next to and listened to for all these many months, to suddenly being the Son of God in their midst. There are 3 times in the Gospel of Mark that we hear a voice from heaven saying, "This is the Son of God." At his baptism by John, the heavens opened, a dove descended, and there is a voice that says, "You are my Son. With you I am well pleased." Here at the Transfiguration and at the crucifixion, when Jesus cried out, my God, have even you abandoned me?" and the sky turned black, and the earth shook. And a Roman centurion declared, "Surely this is the Son of God." Each of these are experiences of glory. Each of these are experiences where the man becomes something far more than that for all time and space. Trying to think through American history, when John Glenn went from being a man to being the first American in space, when Neil Armstrong went from being an astronaut to being the first man on the moon, when Eisenhower went from being the great general to being our president, each of these became far more than what we had ever thought of before. The great tragedy is that as a society, we tend to take people who are larger than life and find their human flaws and tear them down. Witnessing glory, I saw two experiences in the last week. Just in the last week. The first comes with Eastern farm workers. Those who work behind the scenes, milking cows before the sun comes up and after the sun goes down, shoveling manure day after day after day, following the crops, living as we did during the Great Depression, begging for a few pennies for every apple that's picked. Their children not getting education, not getting health care, none of the things that we expect in life. And to talk with one of these who described what it meant for them to have our church say, "We're going to stand with you." It's not about offerings, it's not about tamales, it's not about coats. It's about not being alone, feeling as though there are others who stand with you so that you're not alone. The other happened Friday night. Did you watch the opening event of the Olympics? That great celebration as the children came out with a single light? It reminded me of Christmas Eve when we light our candles and pass the light from one another and then lift them up and the whole room becomes aglow with the light. I think that's a bit of what glory is about. But what happened at that opening ceremony for the Olympics in Korea is that one child's light was passed to another person, to another, until all those choreographed had light. And they became the outline of the yin and yang, the north and south side of the mountains that make completeness. And that became the outline of two doves, South Korea and North Korea. But it didn't stop there. Instead, the doves melded together, and instead of being the outline of two, they filled in each other and became one full dove of light and peace together. To witness the women's Korean hockey team, who didn't win, but North and South played together and defended each other, it was humbling. These are visions of glory in our midst. Transfiguration, it's a hard thing for us to grasp because you've got both the humanity of Jesus and the Son of Man that we're trying to hold together. Which did you learn first? That Jesus was born in a stable in Bethlehem and taught parables and healed people and died on the cross? Or Jesus is the Son of God, light of light, the Savior for all time and space? It's hard to put the two together. And the difficulty is for most of us, we tend to cling to sweet little baby Jesus, who we have hidden in our private little manger, when he is the Son of God and the Savior, the Lord of life for us all.